Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about the film Magic Town from 1947. And this is continuing my quest to review as much of William Wellman's filmography as I possibly can. When looking at Wellman's filmography and looking at Magic Town, I think Magic Town shows what it was like being a studio director and how you could get that to work for you and get that to work for them. And this is probably a better example in the 40s than I'd seen from him at this period. It's usually kind of for him and for them, and there's a big distinction, especially in this period of Wellman's filmography. This film was written and produced by Robert Riskin, who's probably most known for his work with Frank Capra, and it was actually sold on the fact of being Robert Riskin's Magic Town, and it was independently produced by Robert Riskin. If you were seeing this film at the time, you'd understand it was by the guy who wrote Mr. Deed Goes to Town and It Happened One Night and various other like big Frank Capra movies. So you're kind of seeing it for that, and Wellman does a good job at trying to do that style of a picture, but also like not just being Frank Capra light or an imitation of Frank Capra. He really makes it his own, and it does feel very much like a Wellman movie. It feels like there's parts of Capra in there, but it doesn't feel solely Capra. It feels like Wellman actually had some fun with it, and it shows really what Wellman could do and how good of a studio director he could be, that he could take a writer that's known for one director and then turn it around and make it work for his own style while still acknowledging and using the style that most people are probably going to see the movie for in the first place. A man played by James Stewart who runs a polling and consumer survey group, and he's always trying to find mathematical ways to get the surveys to show all of America, and he's always looking for a town, a magic town that has all of the demographics of the entire country in one town, so you could just go to that one town and poll them, but do it in a way they wouldn't know, because as soon as they would know, then that would ruin their opinions. They would know they were special. So what Jimmy Stewart decides to do with his partner, the wonderful character actor Kent Smith, chewing on cigars with an amazing voice, go into this town of Grandview, posing as insurance salesmen, get everyone's trust, and just kind of bring it up in conversation what they think of progressive education, and then sell the numbers to the company who's asking for those numbers. And their plan was that this would mathematically work out with the numbers for the entire country, but they have to gain the trust of the town, and he has to pose as an amazing basketball player. When one of his ex-military buddies who lives there has him coach the basketball team, he starts to fall in love with a girl who runs the newspaper, played by Jane Wyman, and he almost kind of really likes the town. He went in for cynical reasons, for monetary gain and just to kind of get out, but he ends up really liking it until Jane Wyman figures out why he's there in the first place and leaks the information, making Grandview a mob scene, and tons of people are going there to find out the opinions of this town that mathematically is perfect to pull from. As the town gets an influx of money and interest, and James Stewart and Jane Wyman's relationship falls apart as the town becomes busier and busier as they find out they're the magic place to do consumer polling. In a lot of ways, Magic Town is kind of your typical classic Hollywood type of romantic comedy. He has an angle, he has a reason he's there, and he accidentally falls in love, and that wasn't supposed to happen. But the idea of finding a town that's statistically perfect to do polling, it's actually based on the Middleton studies, is interesting, and I thought that was interesting since we talk so much about market testing and test screenings, and to have a film cover that in the 40s and what that would be about. And it is actually rather cynical about all of that. This shows two sides of Wellman corresponding with one another and actually working well together, which surprised me. His incredibly cynical nature, he always had a very cynical side to him and a satirical side to him, I think much better placed in Roxy Hart, which was a couple years earlier than this film, but also how sentimental he could be. He had loads of children who he loved hanging out with. As cynical as he was very much a family man, and you kind of get both of those. You understand that this is a wonderful, amazing town, but you also know that he's there for cynical reasons and what those cynical reasons do to everyone. Wellman pushes this film in a lot darker avenues than I think you'd really expect for this type of film. When Jane Wyman finds out about what he was really up to, it's like shot like a film noir. It was very dark, a lot of shadow, a lot of darkness, very little light, and he kept playing those scenes at night like that quite a bit. And I know he often likes to hide a lot of things, but it's almost like he just wanted the actors to be there. Like, he understood that this is a very intimate moment. How Wellman frames the film around actors works very well with James Stewart and Jane Wyman's chemistry. It makes it so that when they break up for a time during the film, you actually want them to get back together and you miss it. It has to have an impact on you or this film wouldn't work as well. And Wellman knows how to do that. But to show that scene, that confrontation scene, in such a dark way kind of shows how personal and important it was to them. If you film it in the same way as all the other scenes, it's not going to be as impactful. I almost felt like you went almost a little too far with it, which I actually kind of liked. You know, if you're in a relationship and something like that happened, it's something that's going to bug you and nag at you and crawl at you for days and days, and it's probably all you can think about. So in your mind, it wouldn't be shot like the rest of your life. It would be shot rather darker. And I like that about Magic Town, and it shows Wellman knew how to have some fun with some of these scenes and direct them in a different way. And Robert Riskin wrote a decent movie. I like Magic Town for the most part. I like how the twists and turns of the plot is actually what makes it rather interesting to see this town become this huge thing, to see it all fall apart. It's hard to really compliment the film without talking about how interesting the plot is and how cynical it is about making things a big deal. Almost slightly reminds me of Ace in the Hole, although Ace in the Hole is better, which is a Billy Wilder movie, which you should see if you haven't. Magic Town kind of gets that sort of vibe, but also still wants to be this like nice romantic comedy and seems to be able to twist and turn around it very well without losing it. That's one thing people talk about a really great Hollywood movies. It can still be fun, it can still have a romance, it can still be lighthearted, but it can also take on something a little darker and more serious, and I think Magic Town actually does that fairly well. It's like kind of an oddity in a lot of ways. It was semi-hard to find. It is actually on Amazon Prime, or at the time I shot this review it was. Otherwise you can't really find it, and it's not very well known, although Jimmy Stewart had at least a nice relationship with Wellman. He was on the documentary The Man Who Made the Movies, and he's actually quoted on the back of William Wellman's book. And that kind of makes sense since Frank Capra and William Wellman were really good friends, and Frank Capra and Frank Capra's wife were great friends with Wellman and his wife, and they'd always go on day trips together. And Frank Capra actually helped do a polish on the script as well. And this isn't the first time Wellman's kind of worked on a Capra kind of film. West Where the Women was actually written by Frank Capra. They don't feel like directors who really would want to hang out. They don't feel like the same kind of personalities direction-wise. But I think this shows that Wellman could do that sort of thing. They only did that sort of thing twice, and I'd say both times he didn't direct it in a very Frank Capra way. It's almost like Wellman was like, well, let me show how this is going to be different. In this one, he plays a little more safe with it. He still has the big moments that the audiences are really expecting from a Robert Riskin type of screenplay. And I like Jimmy Stewart in this a lot. He kind of messes with his own boy next door persona, makes it cynical in a lot of ways, but uses it to get these people on his side. It makes you like kind of reevaluate him a little bit. But when he's playing the big time city consumer polar guy at the beginning of the film, he was really good at it. He definitely shifts his performance based on what's happening in the film, and he's actually rather good in it. This is 1947 Jimmy Stewart, right around the time that It's Wonderful Life came out and bombed, and this also bombed. It's probably like prime Jimmy Stewart if you think about it, but he is rather good. I like Jimmy Stewart a lot. I kind of wish him and Wellman had worked together more than they really did. Jane Wyman is also really good. Wellman considered a lot of leads for this. Loretta Young was almost the part in this, but Jane Wyman, I think, does a great job. She has great chemistry with Jimmy Stewart. She plays off it well. She's actually kind of sexy in some scenes, especially when he lifts her up in one scene to play basketball, to get this basketball in the hoop. He lowers her down, her skirt's kind of lifted up a little bit. Then after they're kissing, because it's like, I guess it's held up by his leg or something, it kind of just goes down. It was a great moment. I don't know if that was a mistake or something, but it played very well. And I think Jane Wyman, you get the sense that she cares about the town, that she's strong-willed, and you get why she'd like Jimmy Stewart, although there's a whole Freudian thing with that. I don't think this would be a film I would categorize as being stereotypical Wellman, because it's really Wellman doing a Robert Riskin screenplay and doing more of a Frank Capra type thing. Wellman was a good studio director. This is kind of the period where him as a studio director isn't as interesting, and I'd say this is probably a late career interesting assignment studio director type of thing. Even though it was done independently, he probably did it because he was friends with Capra, but it doesn't feel like a Wellman picture, something like The Story of G.I. Joe, which he had done right before, or Battleground, which he would do later. Those feel more like Wellman movies. Magic Town feels like something that he did, and he knew how to do that kind of a picture, and he did it, but he actually had more fun with it. When I think of something like The Iron Curtain, which I wasn't as into as something like Magic Town, or Gallant Journey, those are two films that, you know, certainly they're interesting in their own way, but this is like actually a decent fun movie, and and it's a little sad that it's been forgotten over time. I think Jimmy Stewart's rather good in it, and I like the kind of cynical view of this town that becomes the focus of the nation because they are mathematically the perfect town, and what that does to them. And I think it goes a little further than most of these films that have something become a big deal in the press. They almost do it in a very nice way. This really gets dark with it. You almost see the decline coming, and when it comes, it hits you like a ton of bricks. Wellman does not let that go. That's one of the things I think that's interesting about how sentimental he can be. He's probably one of the few people who I can imagine watching their kids play and then imagining how they were all gonna die in some war or something. As sentimental as he can get, the decline is just as intense as the sentimentality is, and I think Magic Town shows that really well. I know Wellman helped structure the screenplay and work on it a little bit, but you can definitely tell there's a lot of Wellman in there, especially the way it views this whole polling thing and how big of a deal it becomes. And that's what's really interesting about Magic Town, is that sure, it has this romantic comedy in it, and it does a lot of more interesting things with that plot, especially making that big confrontation scene mean a lot more than like someone crying and like the actors usually have to overact. Wellman didn't do that. Wellman let it really play out in a very intense, realistic way, but also that he has a real cynical view of fame, which we also saw in a film he did like Nothing Sacred and Roxy Hart. I think this is actually better than Nothing Sacred. Roxy Hart's probably the pinnacle of him really commenting on fame and how dark that can really be. Whereas Magic Town, I still think seeing a town destroyed the way it is really shows Wellman's cynical view on fame and Hollywood and how he wrapped that up in a decent romantic comedy. I think it says a lot about him as a director, and it makes Magic Town a little more notable than it actually is, and makes it a lot more memorable because you're like, wow, I went through a real journey with that movie. When you hit the hour mark, you might think it's actually done, but it keeps going. The original cut was like 3 hours, and I can almost imagine it because there's so much detail in it. It really takes you on a journey of this whole experience of finding the statistically and mathematically perfect town, and how that eventually like kind of rips them all apart, but how they have an amazing happy ending that brings everything back together. But before that, Magic Town kind of pushes itself further than you can really expect from this kind of a movie, and it shows how interesting and dark Wellman could really be, even with something as light as a Jimmy Stewart fun romantic comedy Robert Riskin vehicle. So if you have seen Magic Town and you would like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. Check out my William Wellman review playlist. I've reviewed over 50 William Wellman films, and if you're a fan of William Wellman, click on the annotation below. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you next time.